Hey guys, Argent Templar here. There's a lot of snarky things I could say right about now. I'm going to take the high road and just keep this educational. So there's this ongoing myth that Christmas is the adoption of a pagan holiday. Now, where does this come from? It largely comes from kind of left-wing professors, kind of anti-Christians, kind of cultural Marxists. A lot of it comes from like Enlightenment thinkers who wanted to discredit Christianity. And it's kind of been adopted by a lot of groups, particularly neo-pagans who want to attack Christianity. So is Christmas based on a pagan holiday? No. There's a lot of reasons for this that we'll go into. Frankly, what's more likely that happened is that there's some evidence to suggest, given that the first mention of Christmas is long before the first mention of Sol Invictus Day, that Sol Invictus Day copied Christianity. A lot of the early cults copied Christianity. A lot of the early kind of Gnostic cults that people say Christianity copied from showed up long after Christian doctrine had been developed. I'm going to cover all this in my History of Christianity series, but most Christian doctrine was pretty well settled by the middle of the second century, and a lot of these movements came after. Or if they didn't come after, they didn't come to that part of the world after. Um, so Sol Invictus Day happened way after Christianity. So let's see here. Um, so holy days. Okay. So let us start with the day of the Christmas celebration. We will look at two early documents from two church fathers, Clement of Alexandria and Hippolytus of Rome. Both of these were wrote around the year 200. They both put the date for the celebration of Christ's birth at December 25th. Now, this is important to note because this is long before Sol Invictus Day. Uh, some of the following is a bit technical. I apologize for this, but I think it's necessary for readers who have access to these resources. When did the earliest Christians pick the birth of Christ at December 25th? And there's a very specific reason for this. In the paragraphs, we are not trying to establish when the birth of Christ actually took place. We aren't entirely sure. That's just kind of when it's traditionally held, and we'll get into why in a minute. We are trying to establish where and when the church began to associate the birth of Christ with December 25th or January 6th. The Orthodox Church celebrates it January 6th. So, I mean, if we were going to talk about the Orthodox, they have a different date for Christ's crucifixion. We'll get into detail why that's important in a moment. Um, but how would Orthodox Christmas have anything to do with Sol Invictus? It's not on the day that they claim is Sol Invictus Day. So that wouldn't explain January 25th, that would only explain January 6th. The reason is there's a slight disagreement over when Jesus was born. They have the same month, it's just kind of a different day. The tradition of celebrating the Nativity of Christ on December 25th or December 6th was spread across all of Europe, Africa, and Asia in the early church. And the tradition was consistent. There was a difference between the Eastern Orthodox Christians and the Western Christians on which day should be emphasized. So we're supposed to believe that all these different parts of Christendom all adopted Sol Invictus Day. Let's see here. People should the Christian Church primarily celebrate the birth of Christ on December 25th, when his birth was announced to the people of Israel, or on January 6th when the wise men or magi visited him. Oh, okay, so there's two different dates, but they're both kind of relevant. Both days are celebrated in the Eastern and Western Church. The Eastern Orthodox Church celebrates January 6th as the baptism of Jesus rather than the visitation of the wise men. But both days were based on the early church figuring from the scripture that Jesus was conceived in the spring of the year at the time of the full moon of Passover. Okay, makes sense. The early church emphasized March 25th, the festival of the Annunciation, as the incarnation of Christ. We'll get into detail why. In recent times, okay, so let's see here. Um, so that was pretty early established. I haven't looked up exactly when the birth of Christ was established and whether that was different from the death of Christ. Let me just check that now. Okay, so it was about the year 200, or a bit before the year 200. So how did the church recognize December 25th as the birth of Christ? Before the year 200, writers in the church had established several possible dates. These dates were based on the traditional understanding of when the world was created, the biblical text, and some very complicated calculations involving solar and lunar calendars from different cultures. By the time Clement of Alexander wrote his work during the period of 193 to 215, from the birth of Christ, therefore, to the death of Commodus are altogether 194 years, 1 month, 13 days. And those who have determined our Saviour's genesis, not only the year, but even the day of which they say took place, in the 28th year of Augustus, on the 25th of Pancon, I believe that's Greek for December, or what we call December now, and um, and treating of his passion with great accuracy. Some say that it took place in the 16th year of Tiberius on the 25th of Month, but others say the 25th of another date. Still others say that, etc., etc. The important lines are Savior's Genesis. Um, the month of Pancheon in the Egyptian calendar at the time corresponded to March in the Julian calendar. Okay, sorry, I was confused a bit there. That means conception. So what Clement is saying here is that Jesus was conceived on March 25th, which is the same day that he's traditionally held to die with, to have died on. There's a tradition in the Old Testament that, and in Jewish tradition, that people are born, sorry, prophets are conceived on the same day they die. So December 25th is exactly 9 months after March 25th. So if they believed that March 25th was when Jesus was conceived, they just added 9 months, which is a traditional gestation period, um, because yeah, if they know that if they were pretty sure of the day he died, they can assume it's the same day he was conceived because that was common for biblical prophets. And December 25th is 9 months after that. It is so. Then we go. So Clement uses the word Genesis in other contexts just to ensure it is not frequent intercourse by the parents, but the reception of it, the seed in the womb, which corresponds with Genesis. So we established pretty clearly here that Genesis means when Mary became pregnant. Between the year 202 and 211, the church father Hippolytus wrote as follows: For the first advent of our Lord in the flesh, when he was born in Bethlehem, which happened 8 days before the calends of January, December 25th, on the fourth day of the week, Wednesday, while Augustus was reigning in his 42nd year, but from Adam 5,500 years. Yes, I know he got the age of the world wrong. No one really knew how old the world was back then. He suffered in the 33rd year, 8 days before the calends of April, March 25th, the day of preparation, the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Okay, so we have one from about the year 200, and then we have a clearer thing around 205 or 206 that confirms this. So the evidence shows that by the end of the second century, keep in mind these are the references we have. They're probably quoting an older source, although we can't really prove that. But I don't think that they would have just come up with this on their own. There's probably been around for a while. Shows that by the end of the second century, the same day as Clement of Alexandria, Christians in Europe as well as Africa recognized December 25th as the date of Christ's birth. That's a good point because Hippolytus is from Rome and the other guy's from Alexandria, which are fairly far apart. So I don't know if they would have had communication. There are other authors to consider. Julius Africanus confirmed this, Ephrem the Syrian, and St. John Chrysostom. Okay, so let's see here. Did Christians steal the date of Sol Invictus? The claim is that Sol Invictus is a more ancient pagan holiday in Rome celebrated on December 25th. The claim assumes that the holiday was so popular and dangerous that the Christian Church sought to oppress it by establishing the celebration of Christ's nativity on the 25th. By doing this, the claim continues, the Christians adopted the pagan day and some of the practices that pagan festivals to make celebrations for Christmas more appealing to pagans. Okay, let's see here. The life of Elagabalus. So, the first mention we really have of Sol Invictus is in reference to the Roman Emperor Elagabalus, who was from, I believe it was the Alexandrian dynasty, who was a really weird guy from Syria. He was the high priest of the cult of Elgabal, who was the sun god. He was so despised by the Romans that he was killed within 5 years of becoming emperor, because he was a sadistic bastard. So he was reigning 218 to 222. Most Romans had never heard of Sol Invictus, and consequently, Elagabalus tried to establish the worship of Sol Invictus as the only god in the empire. I think it was believed that the other gods were forms of Sol Invictus, but he tried to impose it on the empire, and he was assassinated by the Romans because they found Elagabal and Elagabalus so distasteful. Um, so this is 20 years after the first Christian mention of it. Plus, it doesn't reference Sol Invictus Day being on December 25th anywhere in the history that I could determine. Add to this the fact that the Romans so despised Elgabal and Elagabalus that I doubt that they would have declared a national holiday after him. From that time, there is no mention of the celebration of Sol Invictus in Roman history until the rule of Aurelian. Aurelian did try to reintroduce the worship of Sol Invictus by decree in the year 274, but there is no record of the festival being held on December 25th. The traditional feast days of Sol is recorded in the early imperial fasces, and there's a link here which I will include, were August 8th, August 9th, or possibly August 24th, 28th. Aurelian did declare games for Sol every 4 years. There is no record from the period or early historiographers that these games were associated with December 25th in any way. The best evidence suggests that the games were held on October 19th to 22nd of their calendar. Once again, there's citations here. Anyways, let's see here. So then Aurelian was also executed. The earliest calendar that mentions Sol Invictus Day is from 354, so about 150 years after Christianity had established the birth of Christ. Many scholars throughout the years have assumed that Invicti on the calendar must mean Sol Invictus, um, but there's a lot of other festivals to Sol Invictus that have Sol in them. There are many historians and people following them who still assert that December 25th is Sol Invictus in ancient Rome. Some will claim that another religion, Mithraism, had close connection to the uh, December 25th celebration. In fact, there is no ancient documentation tying Mithraism to December 25th or Sol Invictus. The Christian celebration of the Nativity of Christ as December 25th predates anything in the earliest actual documentation of Sol Invictus on December 25th. The earliest documentation is from the 354. So we're just going to look at another example of this. As I mentioned, that the tradition was that prophets die on the day that they were conceived, and Christmas is 9 months after the day Jesus was conceived, because his death was a lot better recorded than his birth. So of all the deities that have some reference to Christmas, here are what we have. Saturnalia was the feast dedicated to the Roman god Saturn, established around 220 BC. Uh-oh, this is really old. It was originally celebrated on December 17th. Eventually, the feast was extended to last an entire week, ending on December 23rd. The supposed connection to Christmas is based on the proximity of the two festivals to each other. So there's only 365 days in a year, so there's bound to be some celebrations next to one another. And because Saturnalia kind of sounds like Christmas, I guess, that means it's the same thing. Okay, so if suggestion were correct, one would expect to find a single reference by early Christians supporting it. I don't really get why the early church fathers wouldn't just say, look, we're taking this over, this holiday belongs to Jesus now. But they don't. Um, the early church fathers, if anything, were like, we don't want anything to do with this pagan stuff, we don't want to whitewash it. It's like when they talk about the saints being adopted from paganism, and it was clearly referenced in a number of different sources, like Revelation and Maccabees. It doesn't matter. Sol Invictus. So yeah, the Feast of Sol Invictus was first celebrated in 274. It was not annual and was not historically documented as being established on December 25th by Aurelian. So we don't know. There might have been. We don't know what time of year it took place. According to inscriptions on candles and other ancient works of art, there's a link between Mithras and Sol Invictus. In some cases, it appears that Mithras believed that Mithras and Sol were two different manifestations of the same god. The connections are difficult to understand given our limited knowledge of the Mithratic belief system. I have looked into it. I can't really figure it out. It's kind of vague. So yes, so from 354 we see that this is the first reference to Sol Invictus being celebrated on December 25th. Given the fact that the Mithraists equated their god with Sol in one way or another, it is understandable that they may have appropriated the date as their own. The problem for the skeptic is there's no evidence to suggest that Aurelian was a Mithraist, or even that he had Mithraism in mind when he instituted the Feast of Sol Invictus. Yeah, so the celebration of the birth of Christ by Christians is also mentioned on the calendar as having been celebrated on that day. Um, so it's quite likely that Christmas came first. The reason for choosing December 25th. Let's see here. Commentary. Okay, so explains in his commentary on the Book of Daniel. Once again, we have Hippolytus of Rome. For the first advent of our Lord in the flesh, when he was born in Bethlehem, was December 25th, Wednesday, while Augustus was in his 42nd year. But from Adam 5. Okay, yeah, so we've already been over that. Let's see here. 19th century liturgical scholar explains that towards the end of the 3rd century, the custom of celebrating the birthday of Christ had widespread throughout the world, the whole church, but that it was not observed everywhere on the same day. In the West, the birth of Christ was celebrated on December 25th, and in the East on December 6th. One is inclined to believe that the Roman Church made the choice of 25th of December in order to enter into rivalry with Mithraism. This reason, however, leaves unexplained the choice of 6th of January. His solution, therefore, was that the date of Christ's birth was decided using a starting point the day on which he was believed to have died. This would explain the discrepancies between celebrations in East and West. Finally, we have something by Pope Benedict. The claim used to be made that December 25th developed in opposition to the Mithras myth, or a Christian response to the cult of the unconquered sun promoted by Roman emperors in the 3rd century, in their efforts to establish a new imperial religion. However, these old theories can no longer be disdained. Um, okay, the decisive factor was the connection of creation and the cross, of creation and God's conception. So yeah, we reference Pope Benedict kind of confirms that this is traditional. So let's see here. That the Christians chose a date so close to the winter solstice is also not proof that this was done to mimic pagan festivals. The various pagan religions all had festivals spanning the calendar. Whatever month the early Christians might have otherwise chosen would still place Christians near some pagan celebration, and oppositional theorists would still be making the same claims. It's true, it could be any day. You could find a god's birthday in any month. You could find a pagan celebration in any month. There was hundreds of gods, they'd be all throughout the year. The solstice was important to everyone for agricultural reasons, in the same way water is important to the survival of human beings. And so we see rituals involving water shopping in the various reasons. That doesn't prove that one borrowed ideas or themes from the other. I'm sure the Incas and Aztecs had beliefs revolving around water, and that they didn't get that from Roman paganism. So yeah, I will include these links. That is my response that Christianity, that Christmas is not pagan. This is Argent Templar signing out.